the vast, overwhelming majority of the world still doesn't own any Bitcoin. We are early in the adoption curve, and people still have a massive opportunity. They know that the last ability that they have, the last chance that these totalitarian, authoritarian regimes have to maintain their death grip on the control of the populace is to control the money. If it wasn't for Bitcoin, we wouldn't have the ability to opt out. But because we do, we can take our monetary energy, our economic energy, and pull it out of that system of control. We're now seeing this game theory of Bitcoin play out at the nation state level. Bitcoiners are becoming and will become the most powerful and dominant political and economic force in the world. Bitcoin does not need politicians, but politicians do need Bitcoin. A Bitcoin strategic reserve will happen in the United States, and I think that it will happen in the United States first. The game is on. This is game theory playing out. Fiat steals from you. They print out of nothing what you need to work your entire life to earn. That is immoral. Bitcoin is moral money. MicroStrategy has been the best performing company thanks to its Bitcoin strategy. Since they adopted Bitcoin, they've outperformed NVIDIA. The biggest career risk for you is not adopting Bitcoin. This is the last monetary revolution. This is the last 0 to 1 moment. Bitcoin provides a check on those fiat currencies, and badly managed fiat currencies will fail faster. Bitcoin will be the world's reserve money. That may happen much sooner than we think. You've done 3 today?
Yeah, I've done 3. Usually I keep it with 2, but the 3 was good today.
Damn, man, you are on it. That's impressive. That's some good stamina you've got.
Yeah, it's interesting because I like actually having 2. 2 is kind of the like 1 is I like to prepare like for like 2 or 3. If it's just 1, it's like, okay, I ramp my energy up for like 1, and then like after an hour, 2 hours, it's all gone. Like I have too much energy for that. Like after the first one, I really want to do another one. But yeah, I did one time 4, and the 4th was just too much.
Oh my God, dude. That's 4 is a little, that'd be a bit too much for me, I think. I think the most I've done in a day is 2, but I'm still mining fiat. So I don't always have the full time to get in a bunch of them, but that's impressive, man. Your show's been crushing it.
Oh, I thought you were working in Bitcoin. What are you doing?
I without doxing too much, let's just say I work in international distribution. So yeah, I'll just leave it general like that. But yeah, so I've got a full-time fiat job, family business type thing, and it takes up a lot of time. So the podcast is my way of being able to relax and talk to Bitcoiners and have something that's outside of that normal fiat mining job.
Oh man, that's great. I because I see your podcast and it's such a professional thing that I thought you do it professionally because your production quality and everything is so good done. And I was like, hey, like he's doing it full time. Like it's amazing to see that you're doing it basically part time, like as a hobby. And your production is amazing.
Oh, thanks, man. I mean, I don't watch sports, so I think that gives me like some extra time. It's like, what else would I be doing in the late afternoons? I'd probably be, wasting the time away at something else. So it's like, why not just have another Bitcoin podcast? Can't hurt. I think we can't have too many Bitcoin podcasts until there are more Bitcoin podcasts than there are traditional finance podcasts. And there are a lot of them. So we've got a long ways to go still. We need more Bitcoin podcasts, many more.
Yeah, I mean, we can directly start with that because it's super interesting for me when people say like, oh, there are too many Bitcoin podcasts. I mean, honestly, I only heard it once actually, and this was before I even started. I didn't heard it too much, but I hear that sometimes, and I'm like, okay, if there's too many Bitcoin podcasts, how is it that the Bitcoin podcasts have viewers and people are watching and listening to them? Like this would be the free market. Like if nobody's watching and listening to my podcast, then it's like, oh yeah, maybe there's too much or I suck.
No, I mean, I think it's funny. I've heard that critique a lot. I mean, maybe it's not even a critique. It's just people feeling like if you're in the Bitcoin space, I think, or you've been following the Bitcoin space very closely, sure, it could feel like there are too many Bitcoin podcasts. You can search for Bitcoin in any of your podcasting apps, and you see a bunch of them, right? But really, there are like millions and millions of podcasts. Most podcasts, I think something like 90% don't make it past the 25th episode. So most of them die off. But podcasting, I think, is like we've seen, especially I think this last election cycle showed us very clearly, the legacy media is dying. It is in its last death throes. They barely get any viewership. Even when they're streaming on other platforms, YouTube, whatever, they're still not getting the viewership of podcasts. Or I was on election night, I was watching between PBD podcast and flipping back and forth and then throwing on some like MSNBC, things like that to see people losing their minds. And PBD podcast had more concurrent viewers than any of the legacy media channels did on YouTube. And we've also seen, between, let's say, Joe Rogan, even guys like, Theo Vaughn, Dave Smith, there's a huge appetite for these long form discussions, for long form podcasts. And when it comes to Bitcoin, we are still barely scratching the surface. Yeah, there might seem like a lot of Bitcoin podcasts because the number of Bitcoiners out there is still relatively small, but the majority of the world still has not been turned on to Bitcoin. And so I think there's still a massive opportunity for people to get out there and, start competing Bitcoin podcasts, start as many as you can, make it so that we completely eclipse the financial, the Finance Boy podcasts. That's when we know that Bitcoin is truly winning. And I think, I forget who it was, might have been NVK said, at a certain point in every Bitcoiner's career, they start a podcast. And I think that might be true. And he's got a great one himself,
They start a Bitcoin podcast and they write a Bitcoin book.
Exactly. It's just a further down the line in your Bitcoin journey. Those things must happen eventually.
I mean, it's only logical because in your close area, you're probably one of the only Bitcoiners. If you haven't orange pilled everyone, and somewhere this energy has to go, and then let's start a podcast. It's kind of how this happened. I just started as a side project, and then with sponsorships, and all of a sudden, money came in, and I was like, oh, I guess I have a business now. I have to go full time now. But it's interesting, especially the Joe Rogan Trump interview. I think a lot of people woke up to that. I saw one comment down there, and I always like to scroll through the comments when I listen to a podcast, something like that, because it's always interesting what people say. And there was like the top third or top fifth comment was like, this is the exact time when everyone acknowledged that a podcast is now more powerful than mainstream media. And I mean, Joe Rogan did a great job in that. And it's really fascinating to see, because also I think Elon Musk actually said it, that the lengthy podcasts that Trump was on with Adin Ross, with Logan Paul, I think it was, also with Joe Rogan, they really made a difference because his key demographics are young men, and Donald Trump just went where his key demographic was.
Yeah, no, and I mean, we're at this point now where independent or decentralized media, whatever you want to call it, podcasts, YouTube channels, whatever, even if they're on a centralized platform like YouTube. But this is independent media, right? This is people that just decided, I'm just going to start talking and talk to people. And I love, you notice that it's actually a lot of comedians are very successful in this kind of format. And I think it's because they're just good at talking. They're also usually, if you're a pretty funny person, you have to have at least a decent amount of intelligence. Like you may play an idiot on stage, but you're generally pretty intelligent if you can come up with a ton of organic and original content that makes people laugh. Like that's hard to do. And so you see these, it may seem ridiculous to somebody who has their head buried in the sand, that somebody like Joe Rogan, who is a Fear Factor host, is into mixed martial arts and all this stuff that he just now is the most powerful voice in the media in the world. Like this is a fact. I don't know how many views he had on the Trump episode, but something probably like 60 million at this point, maybe more. I think still his most watched podcast to date is his original Elon Musk one, which is like 90 million. But I'd be willing to bet that this Trump one ends up breaking that record. And I think you're absolutely right that like this was a moment where people realized independent media is so much more powerful. If they didn't already know, now they know for sure. because people don't want those. They don't want the news soundbite of 60 seconds sitting in a news desk that's kind of scripted, and or like the 60 Minutes interviews that Kamala did, where they were cutting stuff together to make her sound better. Like, there's no authenticity in that, and people can smell the bullshit, and they want to actually hear what a person has to say in detail. They want to get to know that person. They want to know, is this person like just an actor playing a game? Or are they a real person who has real thoughts and they can actually talk about them at length for, Rogan rolls for like 3 hours, which is nuts. So I think the landscape is forever changed, and I don't see it going back. Like, the trend towards decentralization is too strong. It can't centralize back, at least not for a long time. That pendulum always swings back and forth, but I think it's on this side of decentralized and independent media for now.
I have an interesting stats to Joe Rogan because I was researching that once I got in the podcast game a little bit. He did over the past 15 years 3.4 podcasts per week, and this is like if he would just go for an hour, that would be impressive, like super impressive. But he had a conversation with like 3, 4, 5 hours. The hours he did in conversations with people, that alone is so impressive. That alone is so much information in his head, because all the podcast is then now in his head. So like that is just pure proof of work. that is super impressive.
Yeah.
Over 15 years. And he doesn't have to do that. Like he clearly can just like say, nah, I don't like to do it. I just relax. But he clearly has a bigger goal, and it's a true inspiration, I feel like.
No, and I just love it too, because he's just like a regular guy at the end of the day. Like, he'll fully acknowledge that he's not the smartest guy in the room, but generally, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you should probably find a different room. And I think Rogan has done a very good job of, he finds interesting, intelligent people that he wants to talk to, or just random, strange, esoteric people. He brings them in, talks to them for 3 hours, and you can get to know somebody when you have a conversation with them for that amount of time. And you see he has some of his favorites he brings back on, again and again. He lifts up a lot of comedians. But I think that he genuinely uses that platform that he has for good. Like, I think Joe Rogan is a massive net benefit to society. I'm glad he exists. I'm glad that he's too big to deplatform now, I guess nobody's totally too big to deplatform, but I think he's at least safe for a while.
Yeah, it's interesting. For Joe Rogan to deplatform, you really have to get out the big guns.
Yeah, there's always a risk when your primary medium for broadcasting is itself a centralized platform. Like, that's always going to be risk. There's always risk with YouTube. There's always risk with Spotify. Granted, Spotify is paying him a ton of money, so it's not in their interest to deplatform him. But still, as long as somebody, holds the keys to the kingdom and has that ability, it can potentially be used. And that's also why I'm very glad that these sort of nascent open protocols like Nostr exist, because I think these do provide a viable alternative to the centralized media. Because it's great that we have independent media, but that independent media is always subject to capture if it's reliant on centralized platforms. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we go forward.
Yeah, we kind of went from like just big media houses now to independent media, and then now in the future, completely independent media where there are individual people just reporting what they think, and then you can make your own things. And it's also on a censorship-resistant platform. How do you see that when we now have this decentralization movement in media and in platforms, but also in money? How is that looking in like 10, 20 years? How do you imagine that?
Well, I won't pretend to have a crystal ball to be able to anticipate 10 to 20 years, but the trend that I see right now is that we, as we have just been discussing, we already have a trend towards independent media, independent creators, independent voices gaining power, gaining influence, because people want to hear from somebody that they trust, right? That they have built trust with, that they feel like they have some sort of a relationship with as a voice and as a listener, right? But again, we have these centralized platforms. YouTube is a great example. okay, YouTube is a wonderful platform for getting your message out there, for discovery. That said, you are completely at the mercy of their algorithm, of their content moderation guidelines, of the people that run that company. You're at the mercy of Google, who their motto, don't be evil, but it's like, well, we all know Google's done plenty of evil. If something can be censored, then it's vulnerable, right? It doesn't mean it's going to be, but it means it can be, and that means it's vulnerable. And so what I see in the next 10 to 20 years is I see a trend towards some people, there's going to be a small cohort that moves to decentralized publishing mediums like Nostr because they crave the censorship resistance. They crave the decentralized ethos and open source ethos of these protocols. But I honestly think that the majority of people will move to open protocols like Nostr, not because of censorship resistance, not because it's decentralized, simply because it will provide a better user experience for them, because it is not a walled garden. It is not a silo. YouTube is a silo, right? X is great, but X is a silo. It's a closed system. And closed systems are always going to be inferior to open systems by their very nature. Any Nostr application that is out there, whether I'm using Damus or Primal or Highlighter or Zap.stream, they're all interoperable. I publish once and it's everywhere, no matter where my users are. You know this very well as a podcaster. You have to publish on X, on YouTube, on Rumble, maybe, to your RSS feed. RSS is a little bit different because at least that's still an open standard. That's a much better standard. But regardless, you have to publish in a bunch of different places to try and find the users or the viewers where they are. With something like Nostr, you have to publish once. And wherever your followers are, doesn't matter what they're using, they'll find it. And so I think that is ultimately a better experience for both listeners, for users, but also for content creators, for publishers. The censorship resistance is a huge part of it. And I think it's great that that exists, but that's not why people are going to ultimately migrate there. They're going to migrate there because it is simply a better user experience. You have more optionality. You are not at the behest of algorithms that are opaque to you and completely define what kind of experience you have. The YouTube algorithm, I don't think anybody understands, except the people who are writing it, exactly why it's feeding you what it's feeding you. But you can go down some strange YouTube rabbit holes, or it's feeding you stuff that, maybe you like, but maybe you kind of hate, but you just can't look away. It's like a car crash. On Nostr, you have this opportunity for a complete marketplace of algorithms, a feed marketplace. This already exists on Nostr. And it's great to see that, because that means you can choose your own adventure. You can choose what experience you want. Or if you don't want any algorithms at all, maybe you just want to view a chronological feed. That's great too. But I think that people ultimately crave optionality. They want a little bit more control over their experience. And at the end of the day, they want somewhere that they can have fun, right? That they can connect, and that they can feel that they're doing that in a very organic and real way, versus being shown whatever the centralized algorithm decides to show them. And I think that that's ultimately the power. So again, the trend I see in the next 10 to 20 years, I see a movement towards more optionality. And that's the same with decentralized media and publishing, like on Nostr. That's also the same with decentralized open source money, like Bitcoin. People want options. They don't want to be forced by Fiat to use this platform, to use this money. They want to have the option to choose for themselves. At least most people do, I think.
I have two examples with money and with Nostr, because on Nostr I tried it 1 year ago and I was not a big fan, and then I tried it like a month ago and I was like, hey, that got really good in 1 year. Like the improvements in 1 year is extremely impressive, and if this continues like that, that's magical. And my magic moment with Nostr was when I started 2 weeks before that, a Primal account, started to post a little bit, got some traction, was nice, was cool, like a new platform. But then 2 weeks after that, I got a notification on Fountain, hey, you can connect your Nostr here. here. And I was like, oh, okay, let's connect to Nostr here. I don't know what happens, but let's connect it. And then I started replying to the activity on Fountain. Then afterwards, I opened my Primal and I was like, wait, my replies are here and people are on Primal now replying to that, and I can reply back here on Primal. It's like you get a YouTube comment, you reply to that YouTube comment, and then later you see it on X and you can continue the conversation there. That was my magical moment for that. And I was like, that's so much better. That's not about censorship resistance. That's about a way better open protocol that benefits everyone. That was a magical moment for me where I'm like, oh, that thing has a future. I don't know if everyone will use it, but if it's done right, probably everyone will use it. And even the big platforms might come over if the network effect gets strong enough, because the open protocols suck everything in. The same with Bitcoin.
I completely agree. It literally feels like magic. The Fountain integration is a fantastic example of that. And I think what those guys are doing over there is amazing. For anybody who's listening who has not checked out Fountain, I highly recommend you do so. I was a big Apple podcast guy just because it's what comes on your phone, right? It's already there. It's easy. And I used it for years, but then a couple of years ago, I started using Fountain, and it's, first of all, the ability to earn sats. You can earn money for listening to shows. You can give value when you find something valuable, and you want to reward the podcasters that are, giving you value with your own monetary value. But this Nostr integration is a great example of that improved user experience, because everything is connected now. Like you said, it doesn't matter if that you're commenting in Fountain or in the Primal app or on Damus or on Snort or on Iris or any other Nostr client. It's all connected. It's just a different way it's just how you choose to view it, right? But I think that improves so much for podcasts specifically. It improves the ability to have those YouTube-like experiences where, the comments on YouTube, like people love that, right? They love to be able to leave comments, but if you can only leave a comment on Spotify or only on a review on Apple or whatever, that's a very isolated conversation. When you can leave a comment on Fountain and then that comment goes out to everybody on Nostr, that's incredibly powerful. And it aids in discoverability as well for small shows. And that's, I think, a huge thing that is really makes me very bullish on Nostr is anyone can be a creator, right? Anybody with a cell phone, with a smartphone, which is most people in the world today, can be a creator. It's incredible the power that we have here. We call them phones, but they're supercomputers in our pockets, right? The phone to actually talk on a phone call is like the thing you do least on your quote phone. But anyone can be a creator, but it's very hard to get a large reach as a creator on these centralized platforms that always, YouTube loves throwing up a Mr. Beast video, right? Or a, Jake Paul video or whatever it is. They are always geared towards the largest creators that are already saturating that marketplace. But when the marketplace is free and open, when it's actually free market competition, then anybody has a shot at getting noticed, getting discovered, and directly monetizing the work that they're doing by getting Bitcoin. That's a really beautiful thing. And I think that has massive potential as we move forward.
Another thing that I thought about is when you have Nostr, you have to deal with private keys. And all of a sudden, you get introduced to that idea, because when I tell people, okay, I'm convinced of why Bitcoin, show me now how I'm gonna do it, and then I'm always sweating a little, because then I have to introduce to them the key of you have your own keys, and this is for a lot of people the first time ever they hear about private key and encryption. And when people hear things they don't understand, they usually click out, they are away, and it's like, oh, that's too much. But I hope we have that future where private keys are just very normal, and it's not just for Bitcoin, it's just for your data, it's for your entries everywhere, and you can just use it. And that would be, I hope that's the future, and I hope that maybe Nostr can also play a key role in implementing that, because there will be people onboarded on Nostr that might not have an idea about Bitcoin. I don't know if that's now the case. I think now most have an idea about Bitcoin.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I know multiple specific stories of people that I have met like in real life now at this point, gotten to be friends with through Nostr, that were not at all into Bitcoin beforehand. They heard about Nostr because maybe Jack Dorsey or Edward Snowden posted about it. You know, those two events brought in a ton of people because they're very well respected. They have huge audiences on X, on other platforms. And so it's not just Bitcoiners that follow those guys on X, for example. So I know multiple people that came in, had no idea of Bitcoin, and then, you know, were purple pilled on Nostr, but the purple pill led to the orange pill. It was the reason for them saying, wait a minute, you know, I just got on here, I'm posting, and people are asking me why they can't zap me. What the heck is a zap? Oh, a zap is where they can send me Bitcoin. Okay, well, I thought Bitcoin died a while ago. That's what the media said. And then they start oh, okay, I need a Lightning wallet. What's Lightning? Lightning's like this other layer of Bitcoin, but it's really fast and cheap. Oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, let me figure that out a little bit. So I think it's this natural process of discovery that people go through. And it's I would say right now, it's the exception versus the rule on Nostr. Like most people that are on Nostr right now, like the majority are probably Bitcoiners, at least in the US and Europe. There are some big audiences in various, Asian countries that I'm not sure if they're all Bitcoiners, but I think that starts to change as more people adopt this open protocol. And I think, you know, you made a point earlier about larger centralized platforms, maybe integrating Nostr in the future. I think that's absolutely going to be the case. I would not be surprised if in 10, 15, 20 years, every type of, quote, social media platform had integrated, it becomes a Nostr client, basically. It integrates Nostr feeds. Because it's open, easily consumable, it's not a walled garden, why wouldn't you enable a better user experience for your user base? But you know, they have to get over the fact that they'll see it as a threat, because right now the goal is keep everybody within the walled garden, keep everybody within our silo. But you know, Nostr is an open field, and so that's the other nice thing about it, is that because it's a free market of competition, because almost every client is open source. To your point about from 1 year ago to 1 month ago, the change was incredible, right? You can see this, and it's really amazing, and that's because everybody is developing, you know, everybody's building in production. Everybody is developing in real time, and everybody's learning from each other and their mistakes and their failures to make better experiences. But because you don't have control of the users, you are forced to compete purely on who delivers the best experience, who is giving you the most value in that client. And I think that's just an example of open protocols enabling truly free market competition. And that's something that just makes me incredibly hopeful about humanity's future, let's say.
And I think Nostr is probably the first magical moment where Bitcoin is just used and people don't even realize it at first. Like they're just like zapping, they have a Lightning wallet. Maybe they just like follow an instruction Lightning wallet and they don't even question like, I have sats, I have a Lightning wallet. The Bitcoin word is not even there yet. And I think we will come to that future where a lot of people will use Bitcoin every day and don't even realize it, like the same way they use the TCP IP protocol, go out on the street and ask people what the TCP IP protocol is. Most don't have an answer. I don't have a good answer to that. So like that's the magic. They know, okay, I sent this WhatsApp message and there are those ticks coming, and then that's how I know the other person got it. And the same thing will happen to Bitcoin, and Nostr is kind of the first outside of money use case. I mean, it's money sent to each other, but it's not because you want to send money. It's because you want to interact on a social media platform. That's kind of incredible to think about. I never really thought that like Nostr might be the first actual use case, because we always think of like, oh, when will WhatsApp integrate Bitcoin? I know, like we already have WhatsApp on Nostr, right?
Lynn Alden has a really good analogy for this, which is that Nostr adds Venmo-like capabilities to Bitcoin, because obviously a huge hurdle when it comes to Bitcoin. And I don't know if you guys maybe don't have Venmo in Europe, but
I don't, but I heard a lot about it, but I never used it.
So yeah, basically, it's actually kind of, I'll just give for anybody who's not familiar with it, it's actually kind of creepy. It came out years ago now. PayPal has since acquired them. So you should probably delete it because PayPal supports authoritarian censorship regimes. But that's a different digression. But essentially, it added a social layer to payments. So you could add your friends on Venmo. And so, for splitting a check at dinner, you can go and there's, Alice and Bob and Carol, and I can split the check with all of them because I can just search their name and I have them in my contact list. It was also very creepy because it publicly broadcasts. You can turn this off, but by default, it publicly broadcasts all the payments that you're making. So that's just like super creepy. But apparently they thought it would be a fun social thing to show, who you were at dinner with and what you were paying them for. But Bitcoin was missing something like that. It was missing the social discoverability layer that would allow you to say, okay, I want to pay Robin for something. How do I find Robin's address? I mean, okay, I've got to contact him on another platform. I've got to send him a Telegram message, a WhatsApp message, a Signal message, whatever it might be. I've got to request an address from him or a QR code, and then I've got to pay that. That's a clunky experience. And also then how do I know for sure that that's him? Is that, he's not cryptographically signing the message to confirm that, yes, in fact, this is the address that I'm sending you. Is there the possibility of a man-in-the-middle attack or something like that where your data could be changed partway through and another address inserted? But with Nostr, I know that when I go to your NPub, I know that NPub is yours. I know that because it has your NIPO5 verification on it. I know that because I'm already following you. And I have the ability then to, without asking you for anything, I can go and pay you for whatever you need. It just cuts out so much of the clunkiness of that social layer of Bitcoin payment experience. And really, it's having an open protocol for money, censorship-resistant money, is great. That's what Bitcoin provides, sound censorship-resistant money. But if you don't have an open censorship-resistant communication protocol that you can coordinate on, then a lot of the benefits of Bitcoin are somewhat lost. So you need the ability to have free speech alongside free and open money. Otherwise, you only have half the solution. And so I'm not saying Nostr is perfect. I'm sure a lot of people like to point out all its flaws, and sure, it has plenty, but it's at least a really great start. And so very bullish on the combination of Bitcoin for censorship-resistant sound money and Nostr for censorship-resistant communication and cryptographically verified censorship communication. That's really powerful.
I partnered up with Coin Vigilante. This is the most beautiful Bitcoin timepiece that I ever saw created by anyone. Look at that beauty. I love it so much. Coin Vigilante made a perfect Bitcoin watch. That's the perfect, subtle, elegant way to go out there and show that you are a Bitcoiner. And that watch brand is Bitcoin only. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece, and make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. If you watch or listen to my podcast on a regular basis, I guess you already bought some Bitcoin. And now the most important step is to keep the Bitcoin. Keep them secure in a hardware wallet. My personal recommendation for hardware wallet is the BitBox. It's super secure. It's simple to set up. It's also a perfect gift for a friend who has still their Bitcoin on an exchange. And you can get a 5% discount with the code Robin at the checkout. Visit bitbox.swiss/Robin to get your BitBox. And the next step is to really level up your sovereignty as an individual. You have to have the most secure self-custody setup. You have to secure your own devices. You have to protect your privacy. You have to set up an inheritance plan. And depending on where you live, you even want to have a plan B, a citizenship where you can move in case something goes really wrong. And through all those steps, the Bitcoin way is guiding you through step by step. And if you visit thebitcoinway.com/partners/Robin, you even get a 30-minute free call to find out how you can level up your sovereignty.
It's with PayPal. It's really funny because they are really going hard on the censorship. A friend of mine knew that, and he sent 12 cents to another friend of his with the right keywords in the payment reference, and both the accounts got banned. They needed 2 months to unban it. PayPal is worse than Facebook and YouTube. It's like if you write keywords in a YouTube comment or something like that, you don't get immediately banned. Might be that algorithm gets you, but PayPal is really like that's crazy.
It is insane, and I heard a great story. I was interviewing Andy Yen. He's the CEO and founder of Proton. So Proton Privacy, Proton Mail, Proton VPN, and now Proton Wallet. They're developing a Bitcoin wallet. And I was asking him, how did you guys decide to just, spin up a Bitcoin wallet? Like, it seemed a little bit random to me. And then he said back in 2015, either 2015 or 2016, Proton was basically banned by PayPal. They were doing a GoFundMe that was integrated with PayPal. They were trying to get all of the funds from GoFundMe, and PayPal cut them off. They had no access to this. And somebody, one of the in the Proton community, said, "Have you guys heard of this Bitcoin thing? It seems like it might be very useful for you right now." They tried it out. They got tons of donations in Bitcoin. They've still been holding that Bitcoin to today. Good for them. That's amazing. But the point was that, Bitcoin reaches people where the fiat system, the fiat rails cannot. The fiat rails can be cut off at any time. You can't cut off Bitcoin. And we see examples of this over and over again. You see it with WikiLeaks, back in the day. You see it even with people raising funds for relief efforts in Gaza. That's a very, very important power to have as the individual, because if the state, if the corporations that are coordinating with the state, if they can cut you off from money, they can cut you off from everything. Your freedom of speech is very hard to exercise if you are cut off from the financial rails. Freedom to publicly protest is very difficult if you can't buy a bus ticket, a plane ticket, if you can't get where you're supposed to go, if you have been blacklisted, if your bank account's frozen. And we see this as this sort of financial censorship being used. We saw it in Canada with the trucker protests during COVID. You see this again and again and again. The first tool that authoritarian regimes use now is to cut off your ability to transact. It used to be that the first step authoritarian regimes would take is to limit your ability to speak freely, because money was a bearer instrument at that time. It may have been fiat, but it wasn't digital. Now that money is digital, it can be cut off at a moment's notice. And if they can cut you off from the financial system, in America, your Second Amendment rights get harder to exercise because it's very difficult to buy a gun without money. It's very difficult to do anything without money. You can't. And so they know that they have that as a tool. That's why CBDCs are being pushed in almost every country in the world right now, because they know that the last ability that they have, the last chance that these totalitarian, authoritarian regimes have to basically maintain their death grip on the control of the populace is to control the money. Because if they can control the money, they can control you. And that is why Bitcoin right now is more important than ever. In an age where CBDCs are no longer just, they're not talking about them in the shadows anymore. They're out in public about their CBDC pilots all over the world. The Bank of International Settlements working on their, global CBDC, basically. These things are happening, and it is up to individuals to reject this with a, full-throated response to say, no, we will not have our money controlled. And if you try to implement this, well, you know what? We're still going to say no, because we have the ability to opt out. If it wasn't for Bitcoin, we wouldn't have the ability to opt out. But because we do, we can take our monetary energy, our economic energy, and pull it out of that system of control and into an open system that supports freedom of the individual. And that is so much more important now than it has ever been before in this digital age.
It feels like Bitcoin came just at the right time. It shouldn't
Seriously.
came a little later.
Well, I mean, I think it's always amazing to me when you look at the foresight of Satoshi Nakamoto, and you see that they basically, Bitcoin was launched, we know that it's very much a response. It had been in the works for years. It was, of course, building on many other implementations of trying to get to a digital cash, right? A peer-to-peer digital cash. But it was launched in the midst of the great financial crisis. You know, Chancellor on the brink of second bailouts for banks. That's in the Genesis block. So we know that Satoshi saw a lot of this stuff coming. The cypherpunks for years had been trying to work on electronic cash, but it was very difficult to fix that pesky double spend problem, right? And so the fact that that Bitcoin came about at that time and was able to stay under the radar for long enough until it got to the point where it was too big for them to shut down. It was too global for the powers that be to shut down. It's honestly incredible. And I think we should consider, I'm very grateful to all of the cypherpunks, to Satoshi, of course, but also to the early adopters of Bitcoin. I was not an early adopter. First time I heard about Bitcoin was in 2014, and I ignored it. I heard about it in the Silk Road days from a friend who was using the Silk Road. And by the way, I truly hope that Trump frees Ross on day one, because that man deserves to be free. But I heard about it in the Silk Road days. I ignored it. I said, that's whatever, your nerdy magic internet money. I really don't care, man. Back to whatever fiat shit I'm doing. Heard about it again in 2017, ignored it, and bought a Litecoin or two because I thought I couldn't afford a whole Bitcoin. It wasn't until 2020 that I finally came around and was like, I need to look into this Bitcoin thing again, because they're printing money like crazy. They're sending out checks to people. Where does the money come from? What is money at all? But I am very grateful to those early people who did not ignore it right away, who decided to put a lot of time and effort into understanding it in the early days, because we wouldn't be having this conversation here today. We wouldn't be having all these Bitcoin podcasts that we do today if it wasn't for those early folks who built on Bitcoin, who developed on Bitcoin and around it, and who put their time and energy and their economic power into making this a reality. And it is kind of magical that this is a place where we're at now, where you see nation state adoption happening, where you see, like them or not, Bitcoin ETFs brought Bitcoin more into the mainstream conversation. I would always recommend that people get real Bitcoin, not ETF Bitcoin, but hey, to each their own. But it's incredible that we've come from that, just an idea, to something that is globally recognized now, but is still so small. And I firmly believe we are still very, very early. But it's incredible that we've made it this far. I look forward to seeing what comes in the years to come.
Absolutely. I talked with Bram, as you know him, and two other people at the main stage in Amsterdam about the Bitcoin vision in 2050. And it's pretty fascinating to think about that, because 2050 is 26 years from now. That's the whole history of Bitcoin up till now, plus 11 years. On top of already those 15 years that we have, that's a long time, and a lot of things can happen. It's really fascinating to think about that. And yeah, you said it. I think we are still very early. I think I'm, by the way, also class of 2020. I also saw it in 2017 the first time. I got introduced to Bitcoin through a pyramid scheme, like an actual pyramid scheme built around Bitcoin. And I'm glad I did not get into the pyramid scheme. But I bite myself in the ass that didn't look into Bitcoin, because I automatically connected scam with Bitcoin then, and it took me 3 years to get over that hurdle. And that's once you're like researching, you're like, oh, that thing is a scam, and you did not look at Bitcoin per se, you looked at the thing, and then you have to go over like, oh, Bitcoin is not a scam. That was pretty hard. Like that was an ego death moment.
No, I mean, and I think that is the case for so many people. Like, even you look at more recent examples of FTX. I mean, how many times did you hear, either in personal conversations or just in the legacy media, the connection made between, Bitcoin and SBF, FTX, they're all lumped in together. And that's why I think separating Bitcoin from crypto is so very important. Yes, Bitcoin is cryptocurrency. It is the cryptocurrency. It is the original cryptocurrency. It is the only successful and real implementation of it. So yes, but it is not crypto. I use crypto in quotes just to be very clear there. But I feel sorry for people who have been tricked into thinking that Bitcoin is just some scam, that it is in any way associated with any one person, that it is in any way connected to all of the financial crimes of people who have used Bitcoin and the name of Bitcoin to somehow legitimize themselves. Because those people who still believe that story, that still believe that Bitcoin is a scam, they will eventually adopt Bitcoin. But like all of us, they will get it at the price they deserve, the fiat price they deserve. And that fiat price seems to be going up and up and up, and it will continue to rise at a very rapid pace. And so, just right now, I see that people still have a massive opportunity in Bitcoin. And it doesn't have to be all of your net worth immediately, especially if you're a younger person and you don't have very much net worth. What I always recommend to people is just start dollar cost averaging. Just set up an automatic daily buy or an automatic hourly buy. You can do that on multiple platforms, River or Strike. And even if you're just putting in a couple dollars a day, that's something. But you set it up, you forget it, and maybe you increase that DCA in the future. But just setting up an automated DCA buy. Right now, everybody who's been dollar cost averaging Bitcoin is massively in profit, in fiat profit. We all know that 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin, right? But I think that it's so important right now for people to realize that you're not late. You haven't missed the boat. The party's not over. It is just getting started. We are so early. And how do I know this? Because the vast, overwhelming majority of the world still doesn't own any Bitcoin. Not even one Satoshi. That is the majority of the world. We are early in the adoption curve, and people still have a massive opportunity to be able to actually save the value of their time and their energy and their hard work in a money that is not perpetually debased by corrupt central bankers and governments. And if somehow you stumble upon this conversation and you're not a Bitcoiner yet, I encourage you just to set up a daily dollar cost average buy. Set it and forget it, and increase that buy later when you're more comfortable. But even $1 a day will pay. I was going to say pay dividends, but there's no dividends or cash flow in Bitcoin, so it's a scam. We still are so early, and that's something I try to really emphasize to people. We're still at the very early stages, but adoption can move quickly. And I think is going to start to move even more quickly now that we have nation state recognition. We had the former and the next president of the United States at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville. That's incredible. That's a historic paradigm shift. These magic internet money nerds somehow got the leader of the free world to come and try to appeal directly to them. That is incredible. And if you're on the outside looking in and you don't yet realize the significance of that, you're going to be very shocked by what happens next. So better to start dollar cost averaging now, get some skin in the game, and it doesn't have to be scary. That's why I like DCAing. It's a easy, low friction way to get some skin in the game.
I was even more impressed that he got into PUBG. Like that was like awesome. He just got into like this random New York City PUBG bar and buys with Bitcoin. Like that seems to me even bigger, because of course, like Bitcoin conference, it's like a really important voters block. So you can say like, he just want to have votes. But the PUBG, I think, I don't know if people outside of Bitcoin really saw that, and the mainstream media did not cover it that much. The Bitcoin conference, everyone covered that he was there. That was huge. But yeah, let's come to I actually wanted to start today with that topic, but 45 minutes in, let's start with that topic now, with the US election and the implications of that. First of all, were you surprised that Bitcoin is such a huge topic in US politics right now already? Because I was surprised because I know my European politicians. I would be definitely surprised if they talk about that. But were you surprised of that?
It was, let's say, it was surprising in the sense that it's amazing to see something like this happen. Like, you can expect for something to happen, but still be kind of blown away when it actually happens in reality, not just some pipe dream. But I think it's also, while it may be a little surprising, it is somewhat natural and expected, because money is inherently political, right? Of course it is. Money is how everything gets done. Fiat money is how the wars are funded and the bankers stay fat. Bitcoin is political as well. Of course it is. It's money. It's the best money that we have ever discovered or invented, whichever way you want to say it, but it's money. So of course Bitcoin is going to be political. It's going to be a part of the political conversation. Bitcoin is not partisan, and I think that is important to emphasize. Bitcoin is not associated with any political party, but it is political. And what I think is beautiful about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is a mirror for whatever you want to see, whatever your worldviews are. If you're a conservative, you look at Bitcoin and you see sound money. You see a return to common sense in money. You see a return to decentralization and limited power of governments. If you're a, quote, progressive, you see something that is as progressive as anything can possibly be, which is the separation of money and state, true transformation, and open access to a truly fair money for all. So again, Bitcoin is very political, and it made sense to me that it was part of this conversation. Even last year, RFK Jr. was speaking. He was the first candidate to accept donations in Lightning, or on the Lightning Network in Bitcoin, followed shortly thereafter by Vivek Ramaswamy, who did the same thing on stage just a few hours after RFK. But it made sense to me that this was part of this conversation, because also the economic energy that Bitcoiners have is growing exponentially. Yes, the market cap of Bitcoin is still very small, like 1.5 trillion now with the latest all-time high, something like that. But that is growing exponentially. And not only that, Bitcoiners are very good at memes. And that may sound like a silly thing to say, but like Trump's first presidency was basically memed into existence. His second presidency is going to have been podcasted into existence. Communicating information effectively is one of the most important skills that you can ever possibly cultivate. And Bitcoiners have gotten really good at that, because we've had to fight off so much disinformation targeted at Bitcoin over so many years. And so many people have done, we've only been around for 4 years here. People have been doing this nonstop since it started. They've been FUD busting, right? And so being able to get really good at messaging, getting really good at thinking about what are the actual game theoretical implications of Bitcoin when it comes to nation state adoption, framing Bitcoin. And shout out to David Bailey and to all the people who got Trump to that conference, who made that possible. Because I think that Trump realized, after having enough Bitcoiners in his ear, that, you know what, this isn't something that I'm going to ignore, or something that I'm going to somehow look down on and think I can just forget about or squash under my boot. And that was kind of his opinion. If you listen to older clips of him, he said, I'm a fan of the US dollar and not these other things competing with the other cryptocurrencies competing with the dollar. This was only a few years ago. It's a massive change that he's gone through, thanks to Bitcoiners getting in his ear and giving him the right kind of messaging. So it makes perfect sense to me that we're now seeing this game theory of Bitcoin play out at the nation state level. El Salvador is ahead of the game already. They're a small country, but their purchasing power and their economic energy is growing massively because they were the first mover. Now the question becomes, who is going to be the first mover in terms of the G7s? Who's going to be the first mover that decides that can actually print their own currency? El Salvador can't print their own currency. They're dollarized, right? The United States, we can print our own currency. We have a fiat currency that we print out of thin air with a few keystrokes. We don't even have to physically print it anymore. It's beautiful, right? We can just throw in a few more zeros and boom, there it is. Thanks, Jerome. Who's going to be the first major giant geopolitical player that starts printing their own currency to buy Bitcoin? I think that is the question right now. And I think that everyone has been put on notice because of this US election, because of the fact that Bitcoin actually played a non-trivial role in it. Did Bitcoin get Trump elected? You can debate that. It didn't hurt though. And he got a lot of donations from Bitcoiners, a lot of donations from Bitcoiners in Bitcoin. A lot of Bitcoiners put both their voices and their economic energy behind him as a candidate. And even if it moved the needle just a little bit, it still moved the needle. And so now I think every major country in the world, and the small ones too, are on notice that Bitcoiners are a political force that cannot be ignored, that Bitcoin is a monetary force that cannot be ignored. You can try to ignore it, but it's not going away. And Bitcoin doesn't care if you adopt it or not, but it's going to be in your best interest, both as an individual, but also as a nation state, to be favorable to Bitcoin and to cater to Bitcoiners. Because Bitcoiners, I firmly believe, are becoming and will become the most powerful and dominant political and economic force in the world in the years to come. And that's not an if, that is a when.
You said something really interesting. It didn't hurt him to adopt Bitcoin. I think that's really interesting because when you just look 8 years back in 2016, when he was first time elected, back then you could make an argument if he really went also to the Bitcoin conferences. I mean, 8 years back, Bitcoin was a whole different thing. But if he did it back then, maybe it would have hurted him. Probably would have even hurted him because the general population was like, "Why is that that president promoting that weird internet thing that is just connected to criminal activities and having all the electricity?" So like, it's amazing that he can win with being extremely bullish or like being for Bitcoin. Like that fact alone is amazing. And I think, as you also do, that it moved the needle for him a little bit. I mean, in the end, he won by so much that he probably would have won also without Bitcoin. I think so. But it definitely benefited him. And that alone is, it's an amazing signal for the rest of the world. Because now every politician, every leader knows, okay, if I like Bitcoin, I can be for Bitcoin. I don't have to be afraid to stand up before Bitcoin. It's the same thing that happened on the company level with MicroStrategy, with all the other things. Now companies slowly come on. Now Microsoft is talking about it, even though I'm not sure if they actually do it. What was your thoughts, by the way, on Microsoft?
On Microsoft, I think that it would be a very wise move for their shareholders to vote in favor of adopting Bitcoin, because this isn't just an opinion. This is something that you can look at very objectively and empirically and say that, look, MicroStrategy has been the best performing company thanks to its Bitcoin strategy. That this is undeniable, right? Since they adopted Bitcoin, they've outperformed NVIDIA. Like you have hard data to back this up. And you also have literally thousands of hours of podcasts of Michael Saylor going and explaining this in detail. He didn't do this in the shadows. He didn't try to hide his Bitcoin strategy. He made it very, very public. Anyone can follow this blueprint. He's open sourced it essentially. This doesn't have to be complicated. This is very obvious, I think, for any company. But I think MicroStrategy was in a unique position in that that's still a founder-led company, right? Michael Saylor was a founder. He was CEO of it for 30 years, one of the longest running tech CEOs like in history. And he has a lot of sway there. Microsoft or a Google, those are not founder-led companies anymore. Those are companies, or an Apple, Tim Cook did not found Apple. Any of these companies that have a CEO or, CFO, executive board that doesn't have true skin in the game, that is more of a hired gun to come in and do a job, they may view it as being too much career risk to adopt Bitcoin. But I honestly think that it's at the point where if you have the opportunity as a large company to adopt Bitcoin, which all of them do, the biggest career risk for you is not adopting Bitcoin, because it is going to seem painfully obvious in the years to come it should already be obvious, but just in case it's not, these next 4 years will certainly show that those companies that do not adopt Bitcoin are not going to perform even close to as well as those that do. And, you would hope that there would be enough people with the foresight to see that. But again, this is an indication of how early we are. Not all the Fortune 500 companies don't have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. That's a good thing for you as an individual. It means you're still early. So, we can look at it that way and it'd be a good thing. But I wanted to touch on the political side just to add one other thing to that, which is, I think it's becoming very clear. We know that Bitcoin doesn't care, right? Bitcoin can't care. It's an open protocol. It doesn't have needs, desires, wants, hopes, dreams. It just is. TikTok, next block, right? Bitcoin does not need politicians, but politicians do need Bitcoin. It does not pay to be anti-Bitcoin. It will hurt you to be anti-Bitcoin. And it will ultimately hurt your constituents who you purport to represent if you are anti-Bitcoin. So Bitcoin doesn't need you, but you definitely need Bitcoin. And that's another thing that I think is starting to become painfully obvious. But again, everybody becomes pro-Bitcoin at the price they deserve, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the same discussion basically for every level. Like even on an individual level, if you're just like in a family, you kind of have the obligation to now look into Bitcoin. If you're a family individual, if you're a corporation, if you're a nation state leader, like no matter what level you are, it will be painfully obvious in 4 to 8 years that you would have to adopt Bitcoin right now. And you can make an argument that like 8 years ago, it was a different story. It was not that obvious. But now, like, there's Bitcoin ETFs, there's publicly traded companies, there's a president talking about it. It can never be more obvious. Probably this year is the best risk reward year ever in Bitcoin history, because we're still so early from price and adoption, but like we have everyone in there. I always say that we kind of laid in the first 15 years the groundwork. We have all those buckets being Bitcoin in that example, with like Bitcoin ETFs, with the nation states, with the individuals, with the corporations. And now we just wait till the water is falling in those buckets and filling up till they're so full that we need more buckets. So it's kind of obvious to me, and people are waking up. I get actually calls from a friend of a couple which is like 60 years old, and they're like, oh, we heard about that the euro is not that stable anymore, and we're just wondering if Bitcoin might be a good diversifier. And I'm like, since BlackRock started to say it's a unique diversifier, all of a sudden, this narrative actually comes into the mainstream media from people that are completely outside of, like, they're not financial gurus. They're not like, inside the cyber hornet. They're just like a cute older couple, which, were concerned about the savings. And once they come in, then it gets extremely obvious, and still so early. So like it's, I'm getting very excited, but it's the coming years will be crazy.
Well, I think I agree. It's important to remember too, like what Odell says. You want to just stay humble and stack sats, right? That is some of the best Bitcoin advice I think that anyone has ever given. Stay humble. Don't dance too much, and stack sats, DCA. Because this is what I think people need to realize. This is the last monetary revolution, right? This is the last 0 to 1 moment that we're going to have. This is the final battle, the final boss. We know that fiat currencies all trend to zero in the long run. Every fiat currency ever has done that. Every fiat currency that comes after will trend to zero versus Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the final measuring stick. Gold was the measuring stick for 5,000 years, and a very good one at that, but an imperfect one. And Bitcoin has perfected gold's imperfections. And the fact that we are sitting here at this moment in space and time, this is an incredible time to be alive because you get to be here as we transition from, it's a 5,000 year change that you're seeing happen. Fiat was not a change, right? Fiat was a little, what do you want to call it? Like Fiat was just a freak out. It was a spasm. It was something, it was an aberration. We've had gold for 5,000 years, and now we have Bitcoin. You are alive at this moment to watch this transition happen. You are alive and with the opportunity to freely opt into Bitcoin, and you can still just buy it on an exchange. You don't even have to earn it yet. You can trade your depreciating fiat currency for Bitcoin at market price. That's incredible. And I think that it's also important to point out that this revolution is very different. Revolutions, I think that most revolutions throughout history are actually monetary revolutions. Most collapses of empires are actually monetary collapses. The Roman Empire is an example of an empire collapsing for monetary reasons. The French Revolution is an example of a revolution that happened because of monetary failings, right? This is going to be a bloodless monetary revolution, and that's really important. There's no force that's required to make Bitcoin succeed. Force is required for fiat currency. Every fiat currency must be backed with the threat of violence, or people will not use it. Unless there is violence at stake, people have no reason to use fiat currencies. And you can say, oh, well, come on, they're just asking you to pay your taxes in it. What's violent about that? Try not paying your taxes and see what happens. They will come and they will put you in jail. If you resist being thrown in jail, they will hurt you. That is violence, okay? We have a bloodless revolution, the potential for a bloodless revolution, and that is really powerful. But it's only a revolution for you if you actually opt into Bitcoin, if you actually take the time to study it and to realize that this gives you so much power as an individual. And I truly believe that fiat is sort of an immoral aberration too, because theft is immoral, right? Fiat steals from you. They print out of nothing what you need to work your entire life to earn. That is immoral. Bitcoin is moral money. Bitcoin allows you to actually protect your time and energy, protect your work. That is so important and so powerful. And I hope that more and more people start to realize this before every nation state gets on board, before every company gets on board, because that's great. I love to see it. But I care more about the individuals adopting Bitcoin. I care about my friends and family and strangers on the internet adopting Bitcoin. That, I think, is that's why we need more Bitcoin podcasts.
It's interesting because we kind of cheered that Trump is gonna get president and we get like that Bitcoin movement, but at the same time, like, maybe it would have been better if Kamala was there. Maybe they would have dumped all the Bitcoin, would have given us more time to actually acquire more Bitcoin. Because if they, like the Cynthia Lummis bill, it's also something that I want to talk with you about. If it actually passes, and now like the Republicans have the president, the House, and the Senate. House, I think it's not sure if they actually have it, but probably they have all three things. So if that thing passes, this says that they will acquire 1 million Bitcoin. That's a massive amount. First of all, like, I don't know if they actually do that, maybe the price shoots up so much that they lower their targets, but they have the spending power to definitely acquire 1 million Bitcoin. It's just 4 times of MicroStrategy. but that implication is huge. What was your thoughts?
I mean, I thought it was so interesting at the Bitcoin conference. Lummis actually came out on stage directly after Trump. So everybody's starting to leave the auditorium. You know, they saw Trump, now they're leaving. And I almost felt bad because she's trying to yell over the top of them to basically say, hey, I've got a bill in my hand that is very explicit about establishing a Bitcoin strategic reserve. And everyone's kind of like, oh yeah, I saw Trump. Okay, I'm out of here. But that was really important. And I think that, again, people, it's easy to get hung up and say, well, I thought you Bitcoiners wanted the separation of money and state, but now you're just, cuckolds for the state and hoping for nation state adoption. And the reality is that nation state adoption was going to happen anyway. Of course that was going to happen. But regardless, this is still the separation of money and state, because it's still the separation of the control of issuance of money from state. And that's just, I wanted to make that clarification. Also, as far as nation state adoption goes, I would much rather have the US go full in on Bitcoin before China does. Personally, I think that the US's values are superior to China's. I think that the US is a bastion of freedom in a world that trends towards authoritarianism. I think that the US's American values are unique in this world, and that because of those US values, the entire world has benefited from the massive amount of success that American entrepreneurs have created. Wanted to preface that. What do I think about that bill specifically? I think it's probably going to happen, realistically. I think that it would be, many Bitcoiners will feel very betrayed if it does not happen, given that in the United States, there's a Trump is going to be the president. There's a Republican majority in the Senate and the House. They have all three. There's no excuse for them not to. Now, I also trust politicians as far as I can throw them. I think Trump was a superior choice for president to Kamala, but I still recognize that although Trump is a businessman, he is a politician right now, right? So I believe things when I see them, right? Don't trust, verify. We've said it enough times. We should be able to remember that here when it comes to politicians, and especially politicians that you may like. I think we should be especially doubtful if somebody promises us everything we've ever wanted, because, it's easy to make promises. They're cheap. Talk is cheap. Actions have real value. Actions are your proof of work. And so we'll see what happens. I would hazard a guess to say that a Bitcoin strategic reserve will happen in the United States. And I think that it will happen in the United States first, compared to, let's say, Russia, China. But again, the game is on. The game is afoot. This is game theory playing out. The first mover from the large nations will have a massive first mover advantage. This is the reality. You can print a currency out of thin air and buy an absolutely finite, unconfiscatable, uncensorable money. Why wouldn't you do that? And why wouldn't you want to be the first to do that? And so I think it's going to happen for all major nations eventually. The question is, who's going to get there first? I personally, as an American, hope the United States of America gets there first. And we'll see what happens. But the race is on right now. And I don't think no country can ignore this now.
The only thing that I might see is maybe a country like maybe Dubai or like Saudi Arabia, or maybe they see that and hey, he's coming in January. Let's do quickly some buying. That's not out of the question. And maybe some smaller countries. It's the same thing. So interesting to see those things, because when you have now America probably doing that, and you have on the same side also big corporations doing that, like Microsoft at least playing with that idea, then you go ahead and see if you are now a small publicly traded company or you're a smaller nation state, same thing, you're they're talking about it. Maybe they're not doing it right now. Maybe it takes a year. But if it's an inevitability and they actually go ahead and do it, I would massively benefit if I do it now. So I would not be shocked if smaller nation states actually went ahead and do it. And the same thing happening with corporations, where smaller or medium-sized publicly traded companies are just hey, how did that Michael Saylor folk do it? Let's just copy that. Maybe not that aggressive, but let's just do something with that. I would not be shocked if that happens.
I think, and we're seeing that happen right now too. Let's take El Salvador out of the picture, because they were the most forward thinking. They were the first mover. Nayib Bukele was ahead of everybody else in that regard. But let's look at other countries that are doing that. We know that the Kingdom of Bhutan has been mining Bitcoin. They were doing it kind of in secret for a while, but they've been mining Bitcoin with excess hydropower for a couple of years now. We know that large publicly traded Bitcoin miners in the U.S. have deals with Saudi Arabia and other large oil producing nations. And at the corporate level, we know that Semler Scientific, as one example, has already started adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. We know that Metaplanet in Japan has started doing the same and seeing a very large benefit from that. And so I think that you're exactly right. It's easier for these smaller countries, these smaller companies, to see the writing on the wall, which is very clear right now, and to take advantage of that. Because they are smaller, they're more nimble, they're more agile. There's less people involved in the decision-making process. There's less bureaucracy involved. And so there is actually, I think, a massive equalizing force that happens thanks to Bitcoin because of that exact reason, because large companies and large nations, by definition, move more slowly. And so smaller nations, smaller companies have an outsized advantage in that they can see what the large nations are projecting they will do and say, well, let's just do it first and reap many more of the rewards. Why not? What do we have to lose? And I think we're going to continue to see that playing out. We're going to see it intensify as well, I think. I don't know about the timeline for the U.S. adopting a strategic reserve, and the Bitcoin that the U.S. currently holds is obviously not actually theirs. It belongs to, for example, the users of Bitfinex from the large Bitfinex hack. They should give it back to Bitfinex and then let Bitfinex distribute that to the people it's actually owned by. So that's when Trump said in his speech at Nashville, oh, we're going to keep all the Bitcoin we currently have. My first thought was, well, that's stolen Bitcoin. That's not yours. The U.S. government should not do that. They should give that Bitcoin back. And if you're going to acquire it, mine it, print money for it, do whatever you're going to do, but at least don't steal it. The government steals enough already. They don't need to steal people's Bitcoin too.
Absolutely. I mean, the chances of them giving it back, I don't know about American politics, but probably they will keep it.
I don't know. That I can't say. I would hope that they give it back because it would just seem to be, but it's also, it's the government. Like the state is the state is the state. They produce nothing themselves. Everything that they have must necessarily be stolen because the state is not a productive institution. I don't care who is at the helm of the state or what state is there, what state it is in the world. A state is and cannot be productive. They produce nothing themselves. All that they have is stolen and is available to them because they have the power to enforce violence, to legally enforce violence because they have perverted the law for their own ends. But now I digress.
Absolutely, yeah. It's so interesting to talk about that. I will watch American politics probably more than I should in the next few years, like with the elections, because I'm not an American, so. But it's interesting for Bitcoin, and I think it's something that actually right now it seems to be more popular. But I think in general, Bitcoiners. We always say like Bitcoin doesn't care about politics. You also said that, and that's true. Like Bitcoin itself doesn't care about that, but you as an individual are still in that jurisdiction, and they can do a lot of damage to you. So like for you have to be aware of politics for your own sake and for your family's sake. Your Bitcoin will be fine. Maybe they do things that hurt you, but Bitcoin in general, they will be fine. But what do you have from your Bitcoin if you are not fine? So I think being aware of politics is an important thing.
No, I completely agree with that. There's that old saying, you may not care about politics, but politics cares about you. Like, you're right. Bitcoin doesn't care. But as an individual, of course you should care. And I think what I hope that we see in the years to come is more of a trend towards, we have a decentralized money now. I hope that we see more of a trend towards decentralizations of our political power structures. Because honestly, the worst government is the biggest government, and the best government is the smallest government. Things should be done more locally. Governments, state apparatus are more effective locally. Your local community, your state, in Europe, there's now this behemoth of centralization, which is the European Union and the European Central Bank. I hope that we see more European countries say, you know what? This hasn't really been that good for us. This, what has this actually done for us except mandate that we use their depreciating currency that they have, commanded from on high, that they have brought into existence through fiat. And I hope that in the United States, we see more of a trend towards states' rights being first and foremost. The federal government in the United States was never meant to be this big. It was never meant to be this powerful. And again, the best government is the smallest government possible. The bigger any bureaucracy gets, the less efficient it gets. And it's already not efficient because it exists based on theft. And so I hope that we see, and that Bitcoiners champion, a move towards decentralizing power structures, focusing more on localism, focusing more on the things that are directly around you that you can control, that you can influence, because you can have a huge influence locally or at the state level or at the country level if you're, in Europe and your country is not that big. But at least we have Bitcoin that makes a lot of that possible. It gives power back to the individual. And that's the first step, because without that, again, we go back to if they can control the money, they can control you. They can't control Bitcoin. So if you use it in as sovereign a way as possible, if you hold your own keys, if you do some regular security checkups, if you're mindful about how you take care of this, if you utilize incredible technologies like multi-sig to reduce threat vectors against you, you're going to be okay. But the beautiful thing here is that the more people that are okay, the more Bitcoiners that there are that no longer have to live hand to mouth, that no longer have their purchasing power destroyed by inflation, the more that frees up their minds not to focus on running on that fiat hamster wheel anymore, but to focus on actually growing, on building, on being, sounds cheesy, but on being the change that they want to see. Bitcoiners have the power to do that. And because we don't have to use their currency anymore, we can build the parallel systems that we want. And I think that any of these centralized systems, any existing power structure is never going to be changed fundamentally from the inside out. You're not going to get inside the beast and change the nature of the beast. The only way the beast changes is through external pressure from parallel systems. And that's what Bitcoin and other open protocols like Nostr enable us to create. They enable us to create parallel systems that can force that existing centralized system to change because of the pressure that is put on it from the outside, because we're building better systems than they have.
I 100% agree with that. And I can just report, because I watched some of the politics things, the EU critical parties in Austria are growing, in Europe are growing rapidly. We kind of just had 2 days ago, the government in Germany ended. They will have earlier new elections, and a party that is rising that says we are extremely critical of the EU and maybe we want to end it. It's currently the second biggest in Germany. And in Austria, the same one, the most critical EU party actually won the last election. This is something I see in the whole EU, actually, where those who are critical of the EU and critical of what's going on, also with the Digital Service Act and all those things that the EU did, they are raising awareness. And I feel like the political landscape is shifting. It's not only America, it's something that is in the whole world to see. And it will be really interesting to see. I still have I'm on the verge of not being in Austria. I'm okay, I'm in the EU. They're doing a lot of things, and I don't like what's going on. At the same time, I have my family, my friends here. I'm really rooted in Austria, and I really do like the country. It's such a beautiful country. So I right now I'm at the moment where I'm let's see where it goes. I'm really watching closely what the politics in Austria do, but right now it's in the right direction, but if it goes in the wrong direction, I'm okay, let's see another country. El Salvador would be interesting and should be also beautiful.
Have you been to El Salvador yet?
I actually leave 3 days. In 3 days, I leave for adopting Bitcoin,
Nice.
And will be the first time ever in El Salvador, because the pressure has been building up in my podcast. People have been asking, "Oh, have you been there?" And then I was okay, I should go at least once, and I will be adopting Bitcoin. And in 3 days, my plane is leaving.
It's a great country, and that's a great conference too. Carl and I have been to El Salvador twice now. We'll be going back in January for the Plan B El Salvador edition down there. but you're going to really enjoy yourself. There's an air of hope and optimism about the future that is very palpable and very contagious there. And it's going to be amazing to see like the changes that they've made under Nayib Bukele in just a couple of years. Like it's still been a very short time since, he started cracking down on crime, since they started adopting Bitcoin. Of course, no country is without its problems, but they've gone a long way towards fixing a lot of theirs. And it's going to be incredible to see, talk about the next 10, 15, 20, 50 years. El Salvador, I think, will be unrecognizable and I mean that in the most positive way possible. That's what I hope, at least.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I heard those stories from people coming onto my podcast and saying like, oh, how was El Salvador 2019, 2018, and how is El Salvador now in 2023, 2024, that has been like, oh wow, I want to see that. I want to see that with my own eyes, what's going on there. And that's where I was like, okay, let's see if I can make it. And it's a lot of work because I'm myself with the podcast and I do it every day. So if I'm a whole week away and I just assume that I cannot do a podcast there, like not editing and stuff like that. So this week I do like double the work that I usually do, which is insane, but I'm still sane, hopefully. So just to make it into El Salvador, but it's definitely worth it. Like I'm really looking forward to the trip. It's like Christmas for me. This is El Salvador trip.
Yeah, and it's good time of year to go weather-wise too. We went twice. We went just for basically like a vacation in 2022, just around, so a little less than a year after Bitcoin became legal tender there, and just went around. I got to meet Roman Martinez Chimbera, who is very active in the Bitcoin Beach community and has done incredible work down there. And he took us out to one of the schools where we were able to basically see the lessons they go through. I mean, they go in and they've now, as Bitcoin integrated into their curriculum. John Dennehy with Me Premier Bitcoin has also done incredible work down there. But they go and they're actually educating their youth about Bitcoin. And seeing these kids, the incredible thing about it was, they're working with these kids to set up their Lightning wallets and to do these things. And, we're sending these kids sats, and how quickly they pick up on the things that, like a boomer, it's foreign to them. These kids just get it like that. And it's incredible to see this kind of stuff, this outreach being done, but also these curriculums being actually implemented into their school systems. That's an incredible thing to see. These kids are ahead of the game, even though they were born in a country that was not going to give them a lot of advantages at the time they were born. Now they're seeing some advantages. They're seeing that they can be ahead of the rest of the world when it comes to this 0 to 1 monetary moment of Bitcoin. And that is very powerful. I'm excited to see what El Salvador's future has in store. But we liked it so much in the first couple of weeks we spent there. They asked us to come to adopting Bitcoin like a month or two later. We were like, okay, I guess we're going back to El Salvador. Let's do it. It's a great conference too.
Absolutely, yeah. The biggest danger there for me is like maybe a stay. that's for me the biggest threat for me.
They certainly make it very tempting. For me, it's like you're in Austria, I'm in the United States. I know a lot of Bitcoiners are like looking at, okay, I'm going to move out of whatever country I'm in and move into a more friendly jurisdiction. And I absolutely see that. And depending on how things go politically in your country, maybe that is the best move. There's also something to be said, I think, for being really proud of the country that you are from and for trying to stay and make things better there. Sometimes your government may not give you a choice and you do need to get out of there. And that's a sad day if that comes. But I'm sure you have a lot of, pride in your country. I have a lot of pride in being American. I think everybody should have national pride. Like that's a good thing. It's, having those diverse cultures and different types of nations out there. That's a beautiful thing. We're a diverse world. America by itself is an extremely diverse country because we're a nation of risk-taking entrepreneurial immigrants that fled a lot of countries that they didn't like. And so, yeah, I have hope. I have a lot of hope for America. I would have had hope regardless of who was elected, to clarify. I think, again, Trump was a better choice than Kamala. But regardless of who is sitting in the highest political office in the United States, I have hope because the American idea is not dependent on a person. The American idea is an idea. Ideas are bulletproof. That's powerful. I mean, you can't kill an idea. And the American idea, the American dream, is an incredibly powerful one, and one that I think American Bitcoiners really are now stepping up and fighting for. That gives me a lot of hope in the future. I'm extremely optimistic, not just about America, about the world in general. I think we've been in a strange period where centralization was increasing, authoritarianism under the guise of democracy, quote, democracy was increasing, censorship, monetary repression was increasing. But we're going to enter a new era, I believe, an era that is much more free. It may get really nasty before that. I'm not saying it's all going to be cupcakes and daisies and, sweet smelling perfume. It's going to get pretty nasty probably in a lot of places in the world. But ultimately, we now have the tools to create a better world out of the ashes, right? We have the tools, the incredible open protocols to be able to build something better from the ashes of what was before, from this fiat system. And that's why I'm hopeful. We've got a bright future ahead of us. We just have to make.
That's beautiful. And I think that's an amazing end to the podcast, even though we have two more questions. One question is always the same question for each guest. And the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Well, let's see. I'm very passionate about homeschooling. I have a son right now. He's not of homeschooling age yet. He is only 10 months old. But I was homeschooled myself, and I firmly believe that this is a really great path for people to go down. I think that the best education that you can get is in the home from your parents who love you very, very much. The older I get, the more grateful I am to my own parents for this. And I think that also in a trend towards centralization is only broken by a competing trend towards decentralization. This is true in money. This is true in social media. This is true in education. Our education systems have become tools of indoctrination by the state. I've talked about this with American Hodel and Eric Kaysen just yesterday, but some of the biggest pushers of public school systems were the Nazis. It was illegal. It's still illegal in Germany. I'm not sure about Austria, but it's still illegal in Germany to homeschool your kids. That policy started with the Nazis because they wanted to be able to control the public school system, to control what kids were taught, to control the indoctrination system, which is what public schooling has become. That's kind of a crazy thing that you could imagine that still today it would be illegal to educate your child as you choose in your own home in any country. I'm grateful it's not illegal in America. And I would very much recommend for anybody that has the ability, and all Bitcoiners will have this ability, you will be able to afford to only have one parent working because you are saving the value of your time and energy in a truly scarce money, which is Bitcoin. Because of that, I think we're going to see a massive homeschooling boom. We're already seeing this in the United States. COVID kind of helped a lot with that, but in the UK as well, in other countries, people are realizing that you don't need to send your kid to 8 hours a day of sitting in a chair and following rules. Public school is not how you create, not to say that everyone that comes out of public school is some, obedient lemming. Of course not. But that system is not meant to foster creativity, to foster free thinking, to foster freedom of spirit and expression. It is meant to create obedient, dutiful rule followers who will go and work until they die or fight until they die. And this all goes back to the Prussian system of education, which was the original model for compulsory public education. And so I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole, but I would encourage people to read John Taylor Gatto. He has several books about homeschooling. He was a award-winning public school teacher in New York for 30 or 40 years. So he's seen, he's been inside the belly of the beast, but he has some very, very good books. It's John Taylor Gatto. I would really recommend people check out those books, and they're pretty easy reads. They're pretty short. So, spice up your Bitcoin book reading with some John Taylor Gatto, learn about what the public school system is doing. And if you want, you can't be, let me see. Yep. You got him right there. Yeah. So he's got some really excellent books, but that's the thing, we talk about, in Bitcoin, we talk about sovereignty a lot. And I think sovereignty is always going to be a spectrum. You can never be truly, purely 100% sovereign, right? Because it's this very easy thing to go down. Think of like if you've read the essay, I Pencil, you're never going to be able to control every single thing in your life. You can take control of parts of them. You can take control of your money. You can take control of your ability to publish online through, so Bitcoin for money, Nostr for publication. You can take control of some of your food by growing your own food, but you're not going to create every input that goes into making your existence. But one thing that you definitely can control is how your children are educated and what kind of education and from whom they receive. And I think that, maybe homeschooling is not for everyone, but I am very grateful to my parents for doing it. I also then made the decision to go to public school in high school after being homeschooled. So I've seen both sides of things. And I will tell you, homeschooling is a better option. Again, I'll never tell anyone what to do or what's best for them. That's a decision for them to make. But the beautiful thing about the world that we live in today is that you have all of the resources you could ever possibly need to homeschool your kids right here or in your computer. The internet is a beautiful place, and we have so many tools that were not available when I was being homeschooled. And somehow my mom and dad still did it, and they had no experience in it. So you out there listening, you can do it too. And make that choice. Or don't. Bitcoin doesn't care, and I don't either. But that's something you can learn. It's a deep rabbit hole when it comes down to the Prussian system of education, or indoctrination, and compulsory schooling, and why compulsory schooling was made compulsory. It all comes down to control of information and the ability to create dutiful soldiers of the party. So if you want your kids to be free thinkers, then homeschooling might just be a better option for them.
And it's crazy to think about that the state basically takes away your kid for a period of time each day, which is like, oh wow, it's your kid. Like you should be able to decide if it goes to school or not. Nothing against public school. I myself went to a public school,
right?
But it should not be mandatory. Like the state should not be able
Agreed.
to take away your kid. That should be a choice and not mandatory.
I don't think you can, if your country does not at least give you the option of homeschooling your kids, I don't think that's a free country. How can it possibly be if you will be put in jail and your kids will be taken away if you don't send them to a state indoctrination camp 8 hours a day? That's insane. And people should not put up with it.
Apparently, it's possible somehow in Austria. I just checked. I never looked it up because, I'm fairly certain, fairly far away from kids with like my 26 years old now. Maybe in the next few years. But I will research if it's possible in Austria. I know that there's some form of homeschooling, but I think it's like you still have to follow some curriculum and you still have to go give the exam there or something like that. But at least I never really looked into that. I just know from a very young cousin of mine that they have some colleagues that are just sometimes in the school and they are mostly homeschooled. So maybe there's some hybrid model going on in Austria. It's most of the there's political solutions in Austria like, not that and not that.
Hey, a hybrid model is better than absolutely mandatory compulsory schooling. That's at least a step in the right direction. Because I think it all comes down to like, if you are truly a free individual, the state should not be able to tell you what to do with your kids. That's just insane. And I think it's a very easy line in the sand to draw to say, no, these are not our children collectively. They're my children. And you should be able to raise them and teach them how you want to teach them. And ultimately, they're going to be smarter because of it, and more creative because of it, and more well-rounded because of it, and more resilient and have more grit because of it. So that's my non-Bitcoin related rant on homeschooling.
Beautiful. It's actually a topic that comes up fairly often, like every 20th episode or something like that. Homeschooling, it's great. I even made with Lisa have a whole episode just around parenting, and I loved it. Like I looked afterwards in the transcript. We mentioned Bitcoin like 4 times or 5 times.
Nice.
Just a comparison. My Michael Saylor episode had the Bitcoin word 214 times in there. So like in one episode, we mentioned Bitcoin over 200 times. So 4 is really low.
That's awesome. No, I think that these things are important to talk about because, Bitcoin is one part of this equation. It enables us to do so much. It allows us to move along that spectrum of sovereignty in a positive direction. But there are so many other aspects to this, whether it be childhood education, whether it be health and, dietary habits or exercise or just getting out and taking a walk in the sunlight, whatever it might be. There's other things you can do to improve your sovereignty, the sovereignty of your mind, body, and your money.
Absolutely. She framed it so nice. She said, like, we have to raise non-compliant kids in a compliant world, like something like that.
I love that.
I love that also. Really cool.
Lisa's awesome.
Amazing. Perfect. And let's come to the end routine of the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And your question from the previous guest is, will Bitcoin coexist with the US dollar, or will Bitcoin overtake and be alone the currency of the world?
It's a great question. I think that this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think that fiat currencies will always exist. I think that governments will always create fiat currencies. With that said, Bitcoin provides a check on those fiat currencies, and badly managed fiat currencies will fail faster. And I would also say if the US dollar has failed, then probably every other fiat currency in the world has already failed. The US dollar is the prettiest horse at the glue factory. It's the skinniest kid at fat camp. It is the best of the worst. But I think that fiat currencies will continue to exist. They will coexist with Bitcoin, but you will actually have a check on them because you can actually measure, and you can measure that fiat currency against the finite and perfect ruler of 21 million Bitcoin. And people will have a better escape hatch. They will not be stuck with just their country's fiat. They have the option to opt into Bitcoin, to use Bitcoin. So I would say that Bitcoin will have more users, let's put it that way, in not this year, not next year, probably not in 20 years, maybe in 20 years, but it will have more users than any individual fiat currency at some point in the future. But I do not think that every fiat currency will go away forever. But perhaps I'm wrong. We'll see. I just believe that governments will continue to utilize fiat currencies for their own means. But who knows, in a perfect world, maybe governments would shrink down and become much, much smaller and wouldn't see the need to issue their own fiat currencies. But we'll see. I think they're going to coexist for a while. Maybe by the year 2140, when that last block is mined, maybe all fiat will be gone. I don't know. I'll be gone too. So I think in my lifetime, though, we'll still have fiat currencies, but maybe not the US dollar. Maybe it'll be the US will have dissolved into individual states. Maybe they'll each have their own fiat currencies. I don't know.
My father is exactly born in 1971. This is his birth year, and my hope is that he outlives the fiat system. that would be one amazing story. But it's the one topic in Bitcoin where I'm so undecided. I researched in both directions, and I had so many guests who said like 100% fiat will always be there, and guests who said like 100% fiat is gone in like 5 years. And it's a topic where I'm like, oh shit, like I've no clue. Like seriously, it's I'm 100% completely without opinion on that topic.
Yeah, I do not know. I would say that, to add on to what I said before, just that while fiat currencies may not disappear, that does not mean that fiat currencies or any fiat is going to be the world's reserve currency. I think Bitcoin will be the world's reserve money. I think that will happen in our lifetimes. I think that may happen much sooner than we think. But again, that does not mean that fiat currencies will disappear. It just means that a fiat currency is no longer the reserve currency of the world. And so I think that is the more likely scenario. Fiats exist, but no fiat is the reserve currency. Bitcoin is the reserve currency.
Absolutely, yeah. And by the way, I think we have the third longest podcast now on my podcast, like this second or third or fourth longest. Like I usually don't go that long, but it was just such a pleasure talking with you. I loved it a lot. Really cool. Thank you so much, Walker. Before I let you go, where can people find you, DM you, ask you questions, watch your podcast?
Sure. You can search for the Bitcoin podcast on whatever your app is. You can also just go to bitcoinpodcast.net. You'll find all the links to watch everywhere there. You can find me on Nostr by going to primal.net/Walker. You can find me on X by going to Walker America. And you can find the podcast on either of those by looking for Titcoin or Titcoin podcast, and it'll come up. So yeah, those would be the place to find me. But yeah, shoot me a DM if you're interested in chatting. Maybe I'll see the DM. I'm pretty notoriously bad at checking them, but just at me instead. And especially if you haven't checked out Nostr, come and say hello there. I think that your listeners will enjoy it. Probably a lot of them are on there already, but yeah. And thanks for having me, Robin. This was a great time talking to you.
Thank you so much, Walker. Also, thank you so much for everyone who's watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.